April 18, 2025, Washington, D.C. As dawn shrouded the marble staircase of the Federal Courthouse in a gray mist, there was an unusual restlessness in the city. The air, damp and heavy, seemed to herald a storm. The area around the courthouse had turned into a war zone. The press army, CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, Newsmax, and independent broadcasting platforms had set up their tripods and pointed their cameras. The lenses were locked on the doors of the courthouse. The crowd was surging, protesters chanting slogans, holding placards, the curious broadcasting live on their phones, masked figures lurking in the shadows. One banner stood out in red letters. This was no ordinary trial. It was a showdown that questioned the soul of America, a collision between free speech and public safety, between individual courage and systemic control. At the center of the case stood Alexis Monroe, a member of the House of Representatives. A 38-year-old politician, charismatic, sharp-tongued, and unafraid to question the system. Monroe didn't say a word as he walked into the courthouse. Her black jacket, the rhythmic click of her heels, and her straight posture were more like a manifesto than a walk. Cameras followed her, but she kept her eyes fixed on the horizon, beyond the crowd. A whisper went through the crowd. This woman is either a hero or a disaster. Behind the doors of the Palace of Justice, a saga was about to begin. Alexis Monroe's story began on the impoverished streets of Baltimore. Growing up the daughter of a social worker, Monroe recognized injustice at an early age. "The world is not fair, but you can be fair," her mother would say to little Alexis, as her father worked long hours helping families in the neighborhood. These words were etched into his soul. When she finished high school, she won a scholarship to study law. In college, while her classmates dreamed of the shiny offices of Wall Street, Monroe volunteered at community centers. "Law should be the weapon of the righteous, not the weapon of the powerful," she said. 2020 changed Monroe's life. Her fiery speech at a police brutality protest went viral on social media. In the video, a young woman, her eyes glowing with anger, addressed the crowd. "The system is not there to silence you. It is there to amplify your voices. Know your rights, don't be afraid." The speech reached millions. Monroe became a national figure overnight. In 2022, when she was elected to the House of Representatives for Maryland, she was seen as a voice promising change. But his promises made him the target of powerful enemies. Monroe's greatest offense was not keeping quiet. In his first year in Congress, he drew attention with speeches criticizing Elon Musk. He claimed that Musk was enriching himself with public funds and, after buying Twitter, using the platform as a silencing tool. In 2025, when it was announced that Musk had signed billion-dollar defense contracts with the federal government, Monroe's criticism became even harsher. "America's resources belong to the people, not to an oligarch's plaything," he said in live broadcasts, rallies, and tweets. These words mobilized millions of people and caused discomfort in the dark corridors of Washington. The case began when Monroe was linked to the arson of a Tesla dealership and explosive devices found in Texas. The prosecution claimed that his words were indirect terrorist propaganda. But the case was not just a legal proceeding. It was an attempt to silence a woman's voice. When Monroe heard the charges, she turned to her lawyer and said, "They don't scare me. They scare what I say." This summarized the spirit of the case. It was 9:03 a.m. Courtroom 3 of the Federal Palace of Justice resembled a cathedral with its wood-paneled walls and high ceilings. The air was heavy with the smell of antiseptic and the weight of tension. Journalists, lawyers, activists, and a few civilians sat in the audience rows. All eyes were on Alexis Monroe in the dock. Monroe wore a navy blue blazer and a white shirt. His hair was pulled back in a tight bun. There was no fear or surrender on his face, only determination. When Judge Nathaniel Carr stepped onto the bench, the courtroom rose to its feet. A 62-year-old former Marine, Carr was known for his disciplined bearing and sharp gaze. His military background permeated his every move. He had been trained to appear impartial, but this case would push the boundaries of impartiality. Carr opened his thick file and cleared his throat. His voice echoed in the hall. Case number 24, CR 991. Plaintiff, United States of America. Defendant, Alexis Monroe, Congresswoman. Charges: inciting violence against federal property, threatening public safety, indirect terrorist propaganda. There was a buzz in the hall. Indirect terrorist propaganda. This statement was a political dagger rather than a legal accusation. The accusation was fueled not by Monroe's words, but by the meanings attached to those words. The words had become bullets. A woman in the audience whispered, "This is a witch hunt." The man next to her nodded. Prosecutor Pam Bondi stepped to the podium. Her navy blue suit, impeccably cut, was a tour de force. Bondi was a former Florida Attorney General. Her media presence lent a calculated weight to her every word. He adjusted the microphone and addressed the jury. "Your Honor, members of the jury, this case will draw the line between freedom and anarchy." Alexis Monroe used her platform as a member of Congress to galvanize the public. Her tweets, live streams, and rally speeches created a wave of outrage. She launched a campaign against Elon Musk, against Tesla, and indirectly against the American economy. The result, a Tesla dealership was arsonized. 3 explosive devices found in Texas. Nobody gave direct orders, yes. But we asked the question, where does the contact of words with fire begin? Isn't a leader responsible for the consequences of his words? Bondi's voice resembled the fiery oratory of a preacher. The jurors were taking notes, frowning. A division could be felt in the audience rows. Some shook their heads. Others stared angrily at Monroe. One man whispered, "This woman threatens the system. They must silence her." It was the defense's turn. Alexis Monroe touched her lawyer's arm lightly and stood up. She did not go to the stand. She didn't ask for a microphone. Everyone in the courtroom could already hear her voice. "If this case is about words, then let's start right," she said. His voice was calm but sharp, like the edge of a knife. "Yes," I said, "I don't like Elon Musk. I've said it hundreds of times. Because in this country, it's made to look like it's normal for a man who has become rich on public funds to receive state protection to silence that same public opinion." I called for peaceful protest. I said, "Consult your lawyers, know your constitutional rights." But you interpreted it as violence. Why? Because the system demands obedience, not participation. Monroe's words rippled through the courtroom like a wave. One of the jurors adjusted his glasses and took notes. A whisper went through the audience. Judge Carr raised his eyebrows but did not intervene. Monroe continued, "This case is not about my tweets. This is about a system's fear of being questioned. If my words started a fire, it was a spark that was already lit. The problem is not with me, but with the system that accumulated that spark." Silence fell in the hall. Monroe, a revolutionary or a rebel? A journalist wrote in his notebook. The prosecution called its first witness. FBI agent Michael Collins. He was a stern-looking man in his 40s, dressed in a gray suit. Bondi lined up his questions like the moves of a chess player. Mr. Collins, what do you have on the suspect arrested after the arson of the Tesla dealership? Collins replied, looking at his file. The suspect participated in calls from the defendant Monroe and posted videos of him on social media. A note was found on his cell phone that read Monroe leads the way. Bondi turned to the jury and took a dramatic stance. Monroe is leading the way. Is that a coincidence? Monroe's lawyer, Lisa Harper, stood up. Harper was a calm but sharp-witted lawyer in her 50s. She began her cross-examination. Mr. Collins, this man's act is his own act. Is there evidence that Monroe gave a direct instruction, an email, a text, a conversation? Collins paused. No, but he was influenced. Monroe leaned forward slightly in his chair and muttered low, but audibly for all to hear. If that man is impressed, then you accept that I am the alternative to the system. Thank you. A light laugh echoed through the courtroom. Judge Carr struck the table with his hammer. Order. The next witness was Rachel Nguyen, Tesla's legal counsel. Nguyen spoke in a calm and professional manner. After the protests, 12 of our dealerships were damaged. Our shares fell 7%. This was not only a financial loss, but also a threat to the safety of our employees. Harper asked Nguyen on cross-examination, "Can you prove that these damages are directly linked to Monroe's calls? Or was this a general backlash after Tesla's CEO fired workers en masse?" Nguyen paused for a moment. The stock fell after the protests. Monroe intervened directly this time. And did that drop start after the day your CEO called workers lazy on Twitter or after my tweet? Laughter erupted in the courtroom. Judge Carr looked stern this time. Ms. Monroe, let your lawyer speak. On the second day of the trial, tensions rose even higher. Monroe took his defense one step further. After the lunch break, he called his own witness, Maya Torres, an independent journalist. Torres, in her 30s, was a tenacious and courageous reporter. She claimed to have been mistakenly added to a group of American national security advisors on the Signal app. After being sworn in, Torres began to speak. When I was added to the group, a plan to attack Yemen was being discussed. The messages were between senior officials. When I exposed it, they said it was a mistake. But no one questioned the content of these messages. Prosecutor Bondi objected. This is irrelevant to the case. Monroe stood up. No, it is very relevant. Because you didn't react to those messages the way you reacted to my words. So it's not a question of freedom of expression. It's a question of who is expressing it. I am seen as a threat because I question the system. But those who plan bombs in Yemen? They are mistakenly protected. A silence fell over the hall. The jurors looked at each other. Torres' testimony had changed the course of the trial. On social media, the hashtag Signalgate started trending. Beyond the trial, another game was being played in the dark corridors of Washington. Monroe's rise had upset powerful interest groups. Musk's defense contracts were not just a business deal. They were part of a complex alliance between the Pentagon, tech giants, and lobbyists. Monroe's criticisms shook the foundations of this alliance. In the background of the case, a wave of leaks had begun. An anonymous source claimed that after Musk bought Twitter, he used the platform's algorithms to suppress critical voices like Monroe's with shadow bans. These allegations became a bombshell in the second week of the trial. Monroe's team tried to take these leaks to court, but Judge Carr dismissed them on the grounds that the evidence is uncorroborated. The leaks, however, ignited public opinion. On Twitter, the hashtag #FreeAlexis trended worldwide. Protests grew not only in Washington, but also in New York, Los Angeles, and even London. Monroe was transforming from a defendant into a symbol. On the last day of the trial, the courtroom was packed. Judge Carr called for closing statements. Bondi raised his voice as he addressed the jury. Alexis Monroe used her words as a weapon. Her calls led to chaos. Today, in this hall, he must accept responsibility. Otherwise, none of us are safe. Monroe had the last word. He stood up, addressing not the jury, but the entire hall. Judge not me, but what I say. But remember, if you are so afraid of words, then I am not your real enemy. Your mirror is. This case is not about my tweets. It is about a system's fear of being questioned. If I am silenced, you will be next. 11:42 p.m. On Twitter, a single sentence was the talk of the world. If words have become dangerous, the system is sick. And underneath it, millions were writing, "Justice cannot be silenced." The trial ended with a hung jury. Monroe was released, but the charges were not dropped. In the shadows of Washington, another battle was being prepared. As she left the courthouse, Monroe said one sentence to the crowd, "This is the beginning." Social media was abuzz with his words. Supporters on one side, angry opponents on the other. But everyone agreed on one thing. Alexis Monroe was not just a member of Congress. She was a milestone,